Today we are exploring an agent-based model that reconstructs communication and archiving processes in the Republic of Letters. This model allows historians to formalize historical assumptions about letter exchange and analyze biases in the creation of empirical archives. It's an innovative tool that examines how factors like gender, geography, and like power structures shaped historical networks of communication. So, to begin, could you please introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, Mosen. I'm Malte Vogel from the Max Planck Institute of Geoanthropology in Jena, Germany.
Let's start by discussing the purpose of this model. What inspired the creation of this letter standing model, and how does it aim to help historians and researchers better understand, the communication networks of the Republic of Letters?
The idea of the model data. The data was collected, for example, in projects like EMLO, or so early modern letters online, or a project from Finland who looked at called Letter Sampo, who looked at modeling this exchange data. And our idea was to have an understanding not of the archive as a static image, but actually understand the rules that led to the creation of the archive. So we tried to set up a model that allowed, in that case, early modern researchers or to communicate, so to do science virtually, like they did it in the old times, by sending a letter to someone, then reading that letter and adopting the so to say personal empirical stand. And then based from this new empirical position, I formulate another letter and send it to someone else. So the idea is that knowledge can spread with these letters. And we wanted to understand what were the processes that led actually to people to create new knowledge, to adapt existing knowledge, and also what structures emerges from simple rules. That was the starting point. Then, as in any model, we wanted to calibrate. And so I started to try to calibrate the model with the available empirical data and realized that it's actually impossible to fit our understanding of what rules should be in the model with the existing data, simply because it is not everything that we have from the past. It's a kind of a reduced state of what has been there. So the next step of the model building was then to, so to say, postpone this calibration step and introduce a second assumption, a second modeling assumption that deletes from the, so to say, perfect virtual archive based on another set of hypotheses. So we have the first set of hypotheses that says, I think, or we think, people have sent letters with this motivation based on this set of, for example, similarities of ideas, or this range of past ideas that I have still in mind and that I want to still communicate. And then with this perfect archive, we create networks of letter exchange, do statistics on the perfect network, and for example, rank the senders and receivers of letters, and then formulate on this statistics hypothesis. For example, survival of more famous people is more likely. Survival in regions around big cities could be more likely, or simply less old letters are more likely to survive. And then we run a range of, so to say, statistical deletions on the perfect network, giving us a set of, say, a few hundred or up to basically as much as we want, deleted, pruned letter archives. And this is, so to say, this set of results is what we can then use to compare with the empirical data. So it's not a pure calibration step like you would find in more contemporary modeling, but we try to get an understanding of the process of pruning. So we call this, that's why we call this, let's say, the overarching framework, growing and pruning. the Republic of Letters.
Developing a historically informed model must have presented some unique challenges. What were the most difficult aspects of building this model?
Uh, what we actually did was to try to initialize the agents with a historically informed geographical distribution. So what we did is we used estimates for population density of medieval cities in Europe to draw the required numbers. Say if we have 50 agents, agents are more likely to be drawn from maybe the region of Paris or northern Italy than from central German regions. But we only had at that time estimates for certain countries. I think it was maybe not even including, for example, Poland or Spain. So that is something that is really challenging to get historically informed initial conditions for the setup of the geographical regions. That is one point. And the other is, of course, that in a truly or more informed historical setting, what you normally assume is that agents have ranges of interaction. But those ranges were, in historical context, were both geographically and time dependent. So depending on the region you lived in, you had much shorter ranges of exchange, for example, or potential for exchange. And to get an understanding or a historically meaningful value for such ranges was, let's say, out of scope for the building of the model. So we decided at that point to just say, okay, we can find meaningful historical initial conditions for the geography of agents, but we just keep one number for the exchange radius, for example, or the way agents can move. And that would be a really nice addition to continue doing deeper research in this time-dependent ranges and how to incorporate them into such a model.
Let's discuss the findings from this model. What patterns or behaviors have emerged from the simulation? Have any results surprised you, or especially regarding like biases like gender or geographical aspects in the archival records?
So the idea of building this was really to get an understanding of how to employ such simulation methods in historical context. And the last step of actually comparing to the historical data has not yet been done. But the process of establishing this as a method in the historical field is something that captured our attention first. One thing that is really interesting is the use of a method that was called or published under the name of network morphospace. And the idea there is that we have basically the initial, so if you do a model run, we have one output of the model, but then we do this pruning and we get hundreds of different results of the deletion process, because it's a two-step statistical process. First, the actual simulation is statistical, so every simulation run leads to different outcomes, but then the deletion itself again is completely a statistical process. And the idea then of this network morphospace is to embed the results and do principal component analysis so that you can say, if we have this whole set of pruned networks, and in this visualization, we try to put in the empirical results so that we can actually understand in this abstract space what deletion directions bring the virtual network closer to the real network. And that was, the idea that emerged in the research process. And it was, I would say, that was actually the surprise, how far we can come with this idea in a very also traditional discipline, I would say.
You have made this model available on ComSys.net. Were there any challenges in preparing it for public use, especially in terms of its reusability?
actually the process in the so in publishing at COMSIS, I had to read, of course, the whole material and best practices of that are available in COMSIS, and among them, what really is in an ODD, or what should be in an ODD. And then I had the luck to have a colleague who was giving me feedback on that as well. And I basically sat down to rewrite the ODD again. But then after having written it, I also had to go back to my actual programming, the actual code. And there were certain points when I realized this is not, so what I have written in the document is not what actually the code is doing. So the challenge was actually not a challenge in the sense that you normally would say, but an added benefit in my case, because I had actually, I think 2 or 3 deep logical errors in the programming of the model that I only got aware of in the publishing at COMSIS. So that's why I'm also quite happy about the ODD document, and it's a really important resource that I put on Zenodo, only the PDF, just to make it even more easily accessible, also to be able to say like, yeah, this is what you should do, because I think it's a really good practice. Yeah.
So, what's next for this model? Are there plans to expand its features, or adapt it to explore other aspects of historical communication networks?
Yes, so there are 2 lines of research that are still active. So one is that we have actually started writing a tutorial on the methods of modeling and simulation in historical research, and which will be published at Programming Historian pretty soon. That is one. That is another line which is really interesting. And then, so to say, that would maybe be more like an extra model. What I would really like to look at is the effect of the ranges of communication changing in time. So if you have a model that allows you to grow your population and have a coupling to real time, and then introduce the invention of maybe the telegraph, or different avenues of exchanging letters, or maybe then even in the end the internet, what are the patterns of clustering and, so to say, idea spreading in this artificial societies, let's say.
Thank you. Thank you for joining me and sharing your insights.
Most welcome.